Hey, Chris, thanks for being here. I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're talking today about blended families and blending families together. But I kind of want to start with something that's a little bit outside the scope of that. You have a podcast, Handle the Daily Podcast. And one of the lines you have in there, about you and your vision and your mission and all the stuff, which I love having there. You have a line that says your approach is deeply rooted in the timeless truth of Scripture. So I'd just love to ask a very high level question. Why is that a foundational point for you? Why is that such a foundation for you and what you do?
The Bible is living and breathing, and it does not matter how often you go back to it, when you went. Like I could read something yesterday and come back to it today and get a deeper revelation or a different perspective. And it's just going in and knowing, like, wow, the Lord had so many different people put this book together to speak to us now. And when we lean in on that and stop leaning in on our own understanding, that's when we find his truth. That's when we find his provision, and we can move forward with him at our side, actually forging the way so that we can be the tip of the spear with him.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's a big thing to me as well. And um it's the foundation. If we don't
Yeah.
truly, as Christian men, if we don't truly believe Scripture, if Jesus has a line in there. He says, "Why do you call me Lord and not do what I'm telling you to do?" It's so foundational. We're expected to follow his instruction and not just, so to speak, not just the Ten Commandments, not just the love thy neighbor as thyself, not just those lines, obviously, as critical as that is, but all of what he said, all of what he taught. And so, yeah, I'm a big believer that our whole lives need to be rooted in that, in everything that we do, from our careers to our families, and that's what we're talking about here. So um this idea of blended family, first, like to start at kind of a high level with that. What's a definition for you of a blended family? What does that mean?
Well, I'll base it off of my family. So I got married about a year and a half ago. This is my second marriage, and I brought in three kids, 17, a daughter, 10, a son, and 8, a son. And so I had my three. And then my wife, she has a 17-year-old son and a 22-year-old son. And their dad is from Kenya. So they're half white, half African. And for me to go in whenever I was first starting to talk with my wife, like we met, and it was one of those, like, when God puts two people together, like we met in April, we started really talking in August, started dating in late August, because that was right when my divorce was finalized. I had a 3.5 year custody battle, and it
Mm.
was not fun, but it was one of those, like, we just knew that God was in it, and so we moved quickly. But I remember telling my wife, my fiance at that time, I said, I'm not just choosing you, I'm choosing your sons as well.
Hmm.
Now, they might not understand that because they don't know me, but I choose them just as much as I choose you. I'm not just saying, hey, I want her and forget them.
Yeah.
And I think too often, like whenever I first started going down the path with my previous marriage, realizing like divorce was the option, the only option, with how things unfolded, that was the hardest decision I ever made, was just to file for divorce and then to follow through with it. But I knew that in order to do things the right way, I had to not do what other single men do, which is go and start dating again, drink heavily, and do a lot of other stuff. Now, I did have struggles with alcohol, but it wasn't one of those where it was like from sun up to sundown.
Yeah.
And God put people in my path. And when you're in that place of, I don't know if you've ever been through a divorce, but I don't recommend it for anybody. It's one of the most challenging things I've had to walk through. I thought losing my dad was hard. I thought losing my friend to suicide was hard, but this was by far harder because there's no closure. There's the continual of the back and forth of however the court says things have to be with your kids. And in order to find that path forward, you've got to have God in your life. And so in our marriage, whenever my wife and I first started talking, I was like, we have to pray and we have to communicate, but we also have to not have a this is your team of kids and this is my
Mm,
team of kids, and us coming together. Like we have to look at this as a family and just remove the word blended. There's more families out there now that are blended than ever before, but the resources and the mindset and the like there's very little content out there for helping blended families actually do stuff. We talked to another couple and they've been a blended family for 20 years. And the wife, she said, you have to think of this as like a crock pot. You're going to have one carrot that's going to stay hard no matter what.
yeah,
And she's like, but at some point, they'll all soften up to it, but there's going to be one. And just having that perspective gave me opportunity to look at like our oldest who's 22. He and I don't see eye to eye on much, and that creates areas of conflict.
sure.
And when she shared that, I was just like, wow, I need to give this guy compassion that he hasn't experienced. And I have to do that for myself as well. And so it's in that blended family for me is as the dad, as the husband, I have to let go of whatever the thing is that I think is right and look at it as what's right for our family. And so a blended family to me is not using the word blended. It's just, this is our family. You're my
Yeah,
wife. We're the parents. These are our kids.
yeah,
Whether they're blood or not, they're our kids.
yeah. I
So
love that.
sorry, long answer, man.
No, it's all good. Yeah, no, I love that because I'm a big fan of that kind of language. Even when people start talking like adoption,
Hmm.
that's your child, right? That's
Right,
we happen to live in a country where bloodlines aren't really supposed to be a thing. And
right.
so, the idea of this is my child, that's the end. Like that's just a great way to word that. So I appreciate that you phrased it like that. Something that you mentioned in there that I want to go back to and get a little bit more from you. You talked about the your team
Yep.
and how you don't want to be sort of your team and my team or your kids and my kids. Dig a little bit more into that, the importance of not having two teams, but being one family.
So, man, like if you want unity, you have to change your language. You have to change how you look at it. And when God puts together a husband and wife, we become one flesh, right? And it doesn't just extend to just the husband and wife. It that has to overflow into every part of the family. And being as a video producer for the last 20 plus years, words are so important. There's power of life and death in the tongue. And so, as we label, as we identify, as we give things adjectives, verbs, pronouns, and all that, as we describe things, we have to be so intentional. One word could be that thing that the enemy can get hold of in a person's mind and heart and take it and warp it in a way that just does not make sense anymore. And so, by removing these are my kids and these are your kids from our vocabulary and our vernacular, that has helped shift. Now we're still only a year and a half into this, and I'm not saying we have stuff figured out by any remote stretch of
Sure.
the
Sure.
imagination, but just being intentional with the words that we say and what we speak out into the environment in our home and letting them know like, hey, when you're with us, you're home.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And you mentioned that your 22-year-old, he's the hard carrot, so to speak. He might be the
Yeah.
one who's needing that extra compassion as you were talking about. What was that journey like with the rest of the kids from first meeting you to realizing, hey, this is getting serious between Chris and mom, or what was that journey like for the rest of the children?
Man, so everybody has to have a unique approach. And so when I met our 17-year-old Josh, it was one of those where like so my kids we're talking about my kids that I brought in. They're loud. Like they're loud. They're all loud. They talk a lot. They're all over the map. And then my wife's boys, they're quiet. Like so you're talking as much of a night and day as possible
Mm,
in how things go. And so for them, so when I met Josh was 15 at the time, and man, he and I connected really quickly. And I discovered that he has a love for music. And in that, Jamie and I, my wife, we talked about how can we help Josh with his music. And so Josh has had opportunities to do music tracks and scores for some of my clients and some of my projects, and then just continuing to help him. But it was one of those, like, I had to find the piece where I could connect with him and say, hey, how can I help you? How can I serve you? And but also too, it's as a dad, we're not supposed to be buddies. We're supposed to be a dad.
Right.
And there's moments when kids get older where I've experienced a friendship with my own dad after I got older, but we're in that training, equipping, teaching, and putting the kids in opportunity where they're going to have to be challenged. They're going to have to be stretched. And we can't save them from everything. We had someone say, hey, you can't remove that part of what they need to go through because that's part of the testimony. And so being conscious of those moments of like, wow, this kid's got to have some moment where he builds grit. And so finding those moments and just leaning in and saying, okay, God, show me how to be like a dad, even though I'm not his technical dad, but how do I treat him like my own?
Yeah.
And the more I stopped asking that question, the easier it actually became. Because if I'm focused on how he's not my kid, then that makes my actions not treat him like my kid. And so now it's just when we get down, we're doing dinner and everything, like just as much as I would ask my daughter or my sons, I ask him. And so it's just creating this environment of we're all together as a unit. And, some days it works, some days it doesn't work, but we get up and we do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. That's great. And how about conflicts between the kids? I know when sometimes when families are built this way, when they come together this way, there can be conflicts between the children, because they're thrust into this situation too. Not only are they learning a new mom or a new dad, but they also all of a sudden a brother or two or three siblings just pop up out of nowhere and don't have the same life experience and the same life story and all that, and they're just smashed together. So what about that?
Man, my pa, he used to say, you want to see two cats fight, tie their tails together. I don't know if he ever actually did that, but we didn't have massive conflict when we got together because of how we set the tone, of how we communicated expectations. It was one of those where we started in the very beginning of saying, hey, God has brought us together and here's why. And so we brought the kids in from the very beginning into the why. And I
Okay.
believe that them having an understanding of why. Now, whether they agreed with it, we saw moments where there was an agreement. We saw moments where there was contention between Josh and Madeline, and they're 3 weeks apart. They're both 17. They're both going through stuff. They're both trying to figure out, like, wow, why is this guy here, or why is this woman here? Like, why do I have to do this?
Yeah.
And the fact that they actually were asking those questions, I was glad, instead of them not asking questions. And we had to have moments where we had to create team moments where everybody worked together as a team. Like, we're going to do this, we're going to move this furniture, or we're going to go do this thing, and we're all going. And it was in those moments where people didn't want to go, and they ended up having a great time as an end result of it. But it was just getting out of the comfort zone. And I think everything has been all about getting out of our comfort zone. My mother-in-law is about to move in with us. We're about to have construction start on our home, adding a mother-in-law suite here, literally within 10 minutes of us wrapping up this
Yeah.
podcast. And so, like, we're continuing to go through change, but it's been so much fun to see a new definition of family, a new definition of how to parent, a new definition of seeing God move in our kids' lives, and just seeing the unique talents coming through, because there's not competition, but there's collaboration.
Yeah. That's great too. Yeah, you're just wrapping up well. I can tell you've done podcasts before. So you talked about some of the things doing them together as a family, and maybe they were a little bit challenging, but everybody got on the same team and things went well. What's an example of something like that? Something that you guys did together as a family. Maybe all the kids weren't really super enthusiastic about doing it, but it turned out pretty good in the end.
Man, do you know what medieval times is?
Uh-huh.
So we have one in the Dallas area, and we went last June. And I'm talking, we're still like figuring each other out. We're only 6 months in, new home,
Hmm.
new family members and everything. And not everybody was thrilled about going. And we all went, and you saw everybody cheering on their night. And it was one of those like everybody was getting in the car like and then we went and they're like, oh, this is kiddish. It was the older kids. It was all the older kids. They weren't
Yeah.
overly excited,
Yeah.
but man, at the end they were cheering just as much as the little dudes,
Yeah.
and just smiles as they
Yeah.
were walking out. and
Yeah.
and and for Jamie and me, we were like, this is good. Like we felt like a family. We had a group picture taken together, and man, it was just, sorry, I'm tearing up just thinking about it, because that was one of those moments where it was like, God's in this, and this
Yeah.
is going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I love hearing that. Did your guys, did the older, any of the older kids, did any of the guys get the giant turkey leg?
Uh, no, they just did the chicken. They
Okay.
they they just have the chicken. So we all ate with our hands, and it was pretty
Yeah.
funny because
Yeah.
not everybody likes to eat with their hands.
Right, exactly. Yeah, even that's a different experience to kind of go through. Yeah, yeah. So we talked a bit about how there could be sometimes some conflict between the step siblings
Yeah.
and how that can happen. Obviously, there can also be conflicts between the stepchildren and the step parent, and you touched on this a little bit. So whether it's from a particular story from your experience or other families that you've spoken with, how have you seen that play out and parents navigate that side of the equation? Because now all of a sudden here's dad and he's got all new rules and all new ways of doing things that we never did before, or here's mom with all new rules and all new ways of, and I'm gonna stay on my side of the family and ignore this person or whatever. So how have you seen some of that play out again, either within your family or other families that you've spoken with?
So without actually giving any specific examples, but I do want to say this: being intentional. It's literally not getting triggered and slowing down and making sure that you're communicating with your spouse. And so one of the things that Jamie and I do, no matter with what kid it is, we sit down and we talk it out and pray it out first. We are making sure that we are discussing what the consequence needs to be if there is one,
Mhm.
what the conversation needs to look like, what are the 2 or 3 points that we need to bring up, and how do we start it? What's that question? Who's going to start? Who's going to who like if there needs to be a good cop, bad cop, like she and I make sure we're in unity. Now that doesn't always happen,
Right.
but I would say 90% of the time, that is how we do stuff. And then even in like the small stuff, I have her back, whether I am agreeing or not. Like I have her back. And then I'll make sure that if it's a small thing and it, like if I'm getting internally like triggered, I'll wait. I'll wait a day or two before I even say anything, but I'll make sure I'm like, okay, God, is this something that's actually worth me talking with her about? Or is this something that actually needs to happen and I need to understand why it's happening? And I'll tell you, man, out of 20 times, only one time have I actually gone and said something to Jamie about, hey, when you were talking with the kids, I would have approached it this way. And she agreed, like, wow, maybe I should have done it that way. And so it's that intentionality, it's that respect, it's the honoring of one another, and it's requiring us to be in unity.
Yeah.
And when there's disunity, well, there's chaos.
Yeah. And to that particular point of unity, what what's the struggle, if that's the right word? What's the challenge with um you have to build new processes, so to speak. You
Yep.
have to build a new way together as a team in unity. You can't have the mom and the dad just show up and say, this is the way we've always done things, so this is the way we're going to keep doing things, because now you're a new team. So what's it like for you as a man, as a husband, of saying, okay, maybe these few things, the way I've done them in the past, I'm going to have to adjust that, and I'm going to
Yep.
have to start doing them her way in order to make our family function the way we want it to function, the way that God is telling us to function. How about that part of the process of you sort of pulling back and saying, well, this is the way I did everything before. now I need to do things a little differently here.
So it goes back to a biblical principle of ask, seek, knock. And so if we're not asking questions, we're not seeking where we need to go and then taking the action of actually knocking, that's where things can come undone. And so as a natural question asker, I mean, that's like something that I love to ask questions. And I think a lot of people, if they had just 3 or 4 questions that they based their day off, they would have a better framework. And so starting in the very beginning, when Jamie and I first started dating, those are some of the very first questions we asked each other. She likes to ask questions and I like to ask questions. And so we jumped in. I think we enveloped time instead of having to go through the school of hard knocks because we've already previously had hard marriages in the past. We decided to start out by asking questions. How do you do this? How do you handle this? And what we found was there was a lot of alignment in stuff, but there were some areas where I didn't do something the way she liked it, or she didn't do something the way I liked it. And then now, almost 20 months in, I'm seeing we're getting into a flow, but it's that being stupidly intentional with connecting and communicating and knowing that my way is not always the right way or her way is not always the right way.
Yeah. And even if you had two right ways, so to speak, um, one of them could still be better than the other. And so being able to be flexible with that and hear what she's saying is we're primarily talking to guys here. So being able to
Yep.
hear what your wife is saying and adjust and adapt to that is it's so important. Yeah. You mentioned there that you both had hard marriages in the past. Um, that obviously has a huge impact on going forward in the future.
Yep.
So what's you could easily end up, well, here we're in a marriage and we're putting our family together this way, we're building our family like this. What about, well, I don't want to repeat just what I did before. I don't want to make the mistake over and over and over of what I've done in the past. So what are your thoughts on that? On learning from mistakes and ensuring that that doesn't happen in the future?
Well, here's what I love. God gives us time as a value. We have seasons. And so what worked last season might not work this season. And if we're not going to God at the beginning of each transition in our life and saying, Lord, what's the vision? What's the plan? And then we're not taking time to write that out and then share that with others. I mean, that's Habakkuk 2, verse 2. Ask God for the vision, write it out, make it plain so those who choose to run with it can. And I think we've got to be so intentional in knowing our seasons, knowing whether we're in the wilderness and what's going on. What are we needing to learn? Or are we in the valley, or are we on our way to the top of the mountain? And I think what worked in one area isn't going to work in the other way. And that's why we have to consistently go to the Lord daily. Lord, thank you for today.
Yeah.
What is the plan? What is the vision for today? And I'll tell you, the days that I don't do that, that's when it goes off rails. And sometimes it's over the smallest little thing. It could be like that penny on the track that derails the train. Instead of flattening it out and plowing over it, it could be that one thing because it hit the groove in the wheel just right and it knocks it off rails. And that's something that when we are intentional in understanding God's timing, God's seasons that he has for our lives. I mean, I was married when I was 25 all the way up to when I was 41. I'm 45 now. And my 20s, man, that was a interesting time in my life. My 30s, I was not operating like a biblical man should be. I was in a place of working way too much. Work was my mistress. I ran away from responsibilities of being a husband that then caused my ex-wife to run to another man, multiple men. And once I realized, like, okay, I have to be able to work on me because I can't change her, but I can change me. And so I started going through this process of listening to podcasts, probably like yours. I started listening to Order of Man. It was one of the main
Mhm.
podcasts I listened to. And just it started to give me a framework of what a man needs to be. And I'm like, gosh, I'm not checking a single box on this. And so, how do I start checking one box at a time? And as I started doing that, I started seeing things differently. I started saying things differently. I started hearing things differently. And I started doing things differently. And it's been a gradual progression. Instead of trying to change everything all at once, which causes anybody to fail. But
Right.
knowing gradually if we can step into this, I mean, that's what life is. Life unfolds a step at a time, a moment at a time. And I know that what worked yesterday probably isn't going to work for today. And so I try to make sure that I am in communication with God and then in communication with my wife. And we start out our day by finding out where the other is. Some days I wake up and I'm not in a good mood for no reason. And when I communicate, hey, here's where I am, and then she communicates where she is, and we have this come together moment, we're now sharing that with someone else. And it becomes so much easier to not have to bear it and to hold it myself, but to actually let it go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And you keep coming back to the concepts and idea of intentionality. That's a huge one for me as well. I lead events here up in the mountains, and that's something that we talk about. You can't accidentally, I suppose somebody could, but you can't accidentally end up in a great outcome. You're
No.
gonna have to be intentional about that in everything that you do, whether we're talking about your marriage or you're raising your sons, raising your daughters at work. Like, you need intentionality everywhere in your life. So I appreciate that that's part, kind of a foundational part of all of what you've been discussing, is that intentionality aspect.
But man, it did not just happen. Like it was one of those, like I had to realize, like, because of the lack of intentionality, that was why I was seeing failure across the board. And I had just as much blame in my past marriage as my previous wife did. And but it starts with us. It starts with us as the head of the family, as the spiritual head. And if we're not setting the tone right, or we're not even setting a tone, there will be a tone that does get set, and we may not like it.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, like, I love life right now. It has its challenges, but I love life right now. Even when the days are bad, I still love where I'm at because I know what it could be like. I know what it has been like. And my bad days are nowhere near what my very bad days used to be like.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's awesome. That's part of the transformation that God has us on. He wants us to be different people. He doesn't want us just to take one step. It's good that we're taking a step, but he wants us to be transformed into different men, into different
Yep.
people. And that's great that that's where you are right now. Sticking with the relationship at the husband-wife level for a moment, so not about the kids at the moment, but for some families, the relationship that a man has with his ex-wife is great. Others, it's not so great. And on the flip side, the wife in the relationship, her connection with her ex-husband might be great, might be not so great. How does the X, just generically say the X for lack of a better phrase in the big conversation, how does the X play into this in building a new family this way and bringing two families together and creating a family like this? How does the X on both sides play into this equation?
I will tell you that there is opportunity for frustration at every moment if that's what you're looking for in regards to your ex. Like my wife's ex-husband, he has his moments where he excels as a dad, and he has moments where he doesn't. And it's in those, how do we help his sons see him differently? How do we continue to speak and equip things? And so, like Jamie and I, we find ourselves having to be very cautious with what we say when we have a frustration moment with her ex, or and my ex, man, she's a dumpster fire on a good day because she's borderline and bipolar. And so we never know what we're going to get. And you know, because of that unpredictability with both of them, that creates the predictable. We have to go pray. We have to go ask the Lord. And I would say out of 9 out of 10 times, we don't go and pray because it's one of those, because we're already in that. I don't want to deal with that person. And so that's been something that I've seen over the last month and a half of just with kids starting school back again. Sorry,
Hmm.
my phone is getting going do not disturb. But like seeing how I have to be like, okay, we now are back in school. I now have to deal with their mom on a every other day basis almost. Lord, show me what I need to do. And I've got a couple other men in my life. I'm like, please hold me accountable in this area. And this is the first time I've asked other men to hold me accountable in that. And so they're randomly texting, "Hey, did you ask God how to connect with your kid's mom?" No, I did not. Well, why? Because I didn't want to hear what he had to say.
Yeah.
Because chances are he's going to make me have to be kind and speak well and
Yeah. Yeah.
and not want to, like, whatever it might be.
Right. Right.
And the flesh wants to win that moment.
Yep. Yep. Then that's when you text back and say, you know what, on the whole accountability thing, I think we're good. Like, I don't, we don't need that anymore. Which, if they're good at holding you accountable, just makes them do
Oh
it
man,
more. Yeah.
totally, they do it even
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
which makes me so
Yeah.
grateful for these men I have in my life,
Yeah.
man.
That's awesome that you've got those guys. Something that I talk with men about, and this applies whether we're discussing a blended family or the nuclear family is still together in the home. I'm very big on not speaking bad about the other parent ever,
Right,
in front of the children specifically is what I'm getting to. Because there's a certain part, whether the child is old enough to process this or not, the kids know I'm sort of half mom, half dad, just
right,
to use really generic biology terms, right? I'm half mom, half dad. And so if dad is always telling me how horrible mom is, she's in me somewhere. So some part of me, maybe there's a part of me that's horrible. It's not what we normally think of when we talk about not speaking bad of mom or bad of dad, but it's something that I mention to guys a lot, is just be really aware of the language you use. And that's the particular angle that I take, because I'm trying to give them a, perspective they might not have thought of, or something that they might not have occurred to them before. So curious to hear your thoughts on something like that topic, about not speaking bad
dude,
about mom or dad to the kids.
dude, you hit the nail on the head. Because so my daughter, she's 17, and she and I are very close. And there are things that are mannerisms that she has from her mom. And I don't like to be the guy that says, "Man, you're acting like your mom." And no, she's got some of her mom's great qualities as well. And so we sit down and we'll have a conversation. So anytime I'm trying to help her course correct in different areas, I'll say, "Okay, here are the things that are working. Here are the things that are not working. This is what you got that's not working that you got from me. This is what you've got that's not working from your mom. Here's what I've done to help myself work through those things." And oftentimes it's always about letting someone else in. Like, anytime we stay in ourselves, we end up getting isolated and fragmented. And that's what the enemy wants.
Yeah.
He wants to pick us off one by one,
Yeah.
because it's a slow win for him. It's about the war. And so if he can go one at a time, guess what? He's won. And so I'm always like, how do we communicate where we are and where we're not? And having those expectations. And so, yes, I do have moments where I'm really frustrated at my ex-wife. And I found that, with, like, right after I first got divorced, I should not have communicated a lot of stuff that I did with my daughter, but I didn't have anybody else that just got it. Everybody
Mhm.
else that was married couples, and they'd never been through a divorce. They didn't like, and they barely knew what to do with me now, going from being married to being this single dad. And my daughter was the only one that understood it. And so there were times that I vented when I shouldn't have, about her mom, and talking about, "Well, she did this, she did this, she did this, she did this." And now, 4 years later, we're starting to have to work through some of that, as my daughter's gone from being 14 to now almost 18.
Yeah.
And that journey's not easy, man. Like, it's been painful. It's been lots of tears. It's been, but we have to have those moments where we're just talking, even though we don't want to talk. And my daughter, she goes with me to work on video shoots. Yesterday, we were on a video shoot all day together. And we don't talk much about personal stuff, but it's just in that how we communicate. And there were some things I learned yesterday, like, wow, she's not actually asking me questions, but I'm also not asking her, or informing her to ask me questions about certain things. And some of that just comes with being 17. You think you've got it figured out. I remember what it was like when I was 17. I certainly didn't want to ask questions. I was like, I'm gonna figure it out myself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I hope that helped answer
Mhm.
your question.
It does. Yeah, it's something that I think all men who are listening to this, regardless of how your family status is at the moment, it's something that they can definitely take away, that the importance of the language we use to our kids about mom is
Yep.
critical. It's
Yep.
it's it's just critical. And sometimes, as you mentioned, it's easier for a dad to vent to a daughter than a son,
Yep.
because the daughter appears more compassionate. The daughter appears to have more empathy and more sympathy and a listening ear and all that kind of stuff. So we definitely need to be careful on that, because it's very easy to cross that line, and it's very easy to overshare, if you will, and create for ourselves different problems that we're going to have to solve in the future because
Well,
of our venting now.
and I think, Warren, the thing that I've learned is over the last 10 years, I've had some really heavy things go on in my life that have just like take you to your knees and you not want to get back up again. And where I am now versus where I was 10 years ago, I didn't have men in my life. I didn't have friends. I did not have conversations. And I certainly wasn't someone who wanted to share what was going on.
Yeah.
Even though I had employees at the time working for me, I certainly wasn't going to share. Like they had no idea anything was going on, that my marriage was just on its way. It was in a handbag on its way. And they had no idea because I wasn't going to communicate that, because I wanted them to think I had it all sorted out. And that's like whenever I was praying this morning, I was like, Lord, I want to be on this podcast and I don't want men to look at me and feel like, wow, he's got it all figured out. Because I don't. Because oftentimes the only beautiful part of the disaster is the fact that I'm saying it's a beautiful disaster today. But I'm moving through it. And I know I've got four men that I can pick up the phone and I can call them, hey, Evans, hey, Preston, hey, Kevin, and just reach out to these guys and just say, hey, here's where I'm at. And they start asking questions. And then they help me unpack it. And I realize because I took that simple action of making a phone call, I wasn't alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a common theme with so many men, is the
Yeah.
lone wolf thing, and how that impacts our lives in every direction. And it's one of the reasons I started doing this ministry work. I didn't have those guys, and back to the intentionality point, so I'm going to have to build that. I'm going to have to
Yep.
make that network. I'm going to have to make those guys in my life. I'm going to have to make that happen, because I don't have them. Because similar to what you're describing, when I was at a very low point, I didn't have anybody to call. I didn't have anybody to talk to. And so that was something that I was determined to change. And so for me, the way to, since I didn't, it wasn't that I had the guys and I just didn't call them. I didn't have the guys. And
Right.
so I said, I'm going to need to build something so I can get myself some guys. I can get some people on my team, so that I'm not trying to do everything by myself, because it doesn't work anyway. And so that's really powerful that you have those men in your life that you're able to give them a call like that.
Well, and what I realized 10 years ago is I had a massive amount of pride. Pride kept me from admitting and repenting. And in that place, like I didn't even let God in. And because I thought I could figure it out, because I'm a strategy guy, I'm a vision guy, like I see and can solve problems for everybody else. Why can't I do that for myself?
Right.
It's because God made us to where we have to have fellowship and relationship with Him.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I like to remind people on that one that we need other people in our lives. David's worst moments in the Bible, he's alone.
Yep.
Nathan shows up later to call him out, as a good friend should.
Yeah.
But when he's making his decisions, he's just making his decisions. There's no one there to keep him in check. There's no one there to say, hey, dude, you are not going the right way here. And instead, again, Nathan, awesome that he was there and able to call him out afterwards. But having those guys to do life with in the moment is, it's, I was speaking with a guy previously, and it's one of those things that a man doesn't, it's very difficult sometimes to explain to a man, because if you don't have it and you've never experienced it, you don't know what you're missing.
Totally.
It's one of those where you just don't even understand. And then you hear other guys talk about the importance, but you don't have it. So you're like, I don't even get really what you guys are talking about. You're like, I'm a man. I got it all figured out.
Yeah, that's what all the action movies from the 80s taught all of us.
Yeah.
I can do it myself.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I love those movies. So like it's
Right?
not really a great role model, but man, those are a lot of fun to watch. They're just fun as well because they're just straight at now we're going to get off topic. I'm a movie
Yeah.
guy, so don't
Sorry,
get me
man.
off topic, but they're just straight action. We don't have to have a
Yep.
deep philosophical societal thing. It's just fun action. So
Yep.
bringing it back to this. I know one of the other challenges when families are brought together like this is on the financial side because the husband, the man, he's got his financial life,
Yep.
wife, her situation, she's got her financial life. And that's also something that has to get brought together, just like the children have to get brought together and experiences and everything have to get brought together. What's some of your experience on that? Or again, if you'd prefer some of the other families that you may have talked with or learned about over the years, how have they dealt with the issue of, well, we've also got this financial thing. I personally wouldn't recommend keeping that separate. I would say life is together, but that's just my own feeling on that. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences on the financial side of this as well.
It all has to be brought together. Like there's no other way. I mean, if you want to have unity in your marriage, you have to have unity in your finances, you have to have unity in your prayer life, you have to have unity in all areas. And I think that if you've got separate accounts, that allows for secrets to happen, that
Yeah.
allows for truths to not be shared. I think it is absolutely important. And so that's how we started it. My wife, she loves to make sure everything's paid on time. She loves to make sure that the book's balanced, that we've got what we need. And so I'm like, let me go get the money and you go pay whatever needs to be paid. And so we've got this process worked out where we talk through the finances on where we're at, but she handles paying everything. And whenever I'm in a place like we have our own small business, and some months it's great, some months it's not great, and that's just part of doing
Hmm.
life. And especially like I can be classified as a solopreneur. I've got contractors that I bring in, but for the most part it's I hunt, I eat what I kill. And if I'm not out there going and selling, I'm not out there prospecting, I'm not out there building relationships, guess what? Word of mouth only goes so far. And when we're in a place where there's bills coming up, Jamie should be like, hey, Chris, where are we at on this?
Hmm.
I haven't always had the best response when she does that because I'm like, I'm working on it.
Yeah, yeah.
But am I actually working on it? Am I being intentional with blocking time and doing all that? And it's easy to get distracted by everything that gets thrown at us because we're bombarded by information. But it's again like going back and having accountability. Like I've got one buddy, Evans. He lives in Columbia, South Carolina. He and I talk. He does sales coaching and consulting. And so I tell him, hey man, these are how many people I'm talking to. And then I let him know. And then I let my wife know, hey, look, I just shared this with Evans. This is where we're at. And it's been something that's been new because we had a lot of business coming in when we first launched the business right after we got married, just from previous clients. But then we hit a lull about May, June of this year. And I mean, what my previous bills were when it was just me and my three kids, we 4X'd that by us all coming together because you go from
Hmm.
having a house that's like 1,500 to 2,000 square feet to now needing a house that's twice that because you got twice the amount of people, you got twice the amount of food, you got twice the amount of utilities. Like everything went up. And so I had to increase my expectation of, wow, I've actually got to go do this much work.
Yeah.
And I'm not one of those that likes to go and just have excess. But also, too, like I've found that over this last 90 days, I was dealing with imposter syndrome. I was dealing with so much doubt about what I could actually do. And there had to be a streamlining because I had said yes to a lot of different things. We had a podcast that we launched in March and we were doing 2 episodes a week. And so at the end of May, I just felt like I needed to turn that off for the summer. And we did. We were also co-hosting a home church on Friday. So every other Friday, we had anywhere from 15 to 30 people in our home. And it wasn't just a 2 hour service. We went from like 7 to midnight. And
Mm.
so prepping for a message was an hour and a half long message that then would turn into a conversation that would turn into prayer, healing, and prophetic. And if you've run anything like that, like there's the spiritual warfare that comes with that. There's
Oh yeah.
so much that like, and so we stepped down from that as well because we jumped right into that after getting married. We jumped into so much after we got married that I just felt like the Lord was saying, Chris, you have to stop. You have to slow down. Did you ask me for this? Did you ask me for that? And realizing, wow, I did that out of my own might. And this last 90 days has shown me so much of I was doing stuff out of pride. I was doing stuff because I thought I could. And when I realized that and I started sharing more of that with these four men in my life, like they're like, Chris, it's okay. And then coming to terms with it being okay, like it was okay to let a lot of that go. And
Yeah.
so now we're in this place of starting to walk in new favor in business, which is really amazing. And just seeing how the letting go so that I could actually grab onto what God has for us has been good. But man, it's still we're still in the very beginning of it. And finances are not an easy thing. They are from month to month, man. Like some months we got it all covered. Some months we're halfway through and I'm like, man, I don't know how we're going to pay the mortgage. But I know God always brings us through.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And it's a challenge for all couples,
Yeah.
the money issue, whether they've been married for 1 year, 10 years, 20 years.
Yeah.
That's a challenge that couples all deal with. And it can even be little things like a couple's been married for 20 years and it's Christmas time and the husband wants to buy stuff for his wife, but he doesn't want her to know. Like I want sort of this to be my surprise gift for you for Christmas. So then they've got to figure out little things like that. Like how do I buy you a birthday present or a Christmas present without you seeing it on, our shared Amazon, or all
Yeah.
those kinds of things. So I appreciate you sharing those details there because I think all couples can relate to that. All men can relate to that. The working this out and figuring this out together. I am curious with letting go of those things. Was that a conversation you brought to your wife? Was that a conversation she brought to you? Did you happen upon it simultaneously? How did that part go? Especially like the Friday night church,
So
for
the
example.
Friday home church is where we actually met. She'd been part of that church for 12 years. And so there was my wife is very duty driven in the things that she does. She is a server at heart. Like when she's serving people, she is smiling and it's not a fake smile. It's like she feels loved by loving people that way. And I brought it up back in April and I was like, "Hey, I'm thinking we need to step down." And that conversation didn't go well. We continued hosting all the way up until I was like, "I'm done." And it was on a Thursday. I let the guy know that had started the home church 13 years ago. Hey, tomorrow is our last Friday we're hosting. Like, I can't go past this. And, and it was in that moment of like, wow, you didn't give me a choice. You didn't even give me a voice, but we're 2 months past that. And she's like, we've made the right decision.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so, but it was one of those, like, I realized like I didn't have anything to give. I was scraping air in that spiritual bucket and I was not in the word like I needed to. I was not praying like I needed to. I was not doing a lot of stuff that we need to be doing and just getting back to a place of trusting the Lord again, knowing that he has what we need. We just have to ask.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love that story because those are hard things to go through,
It
and
sucked.
realizing we just need to ask, realizing that let's stop relying so heavily on me and my ability, and instead go to him and ask, what do you want in this situation? What do you want in this season? What do you want from me? And
Yeah.
then being able to pull that pride back and say, okay, your plan is right. And I'm going to follow your plan.
The hardest and best thing to do is to die to self.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And that has been the journey I've been on the last several weeks. And man, the weight is lifting, the frustration is going, the clarity is coming in, the discernment is increasing. And I remember just 3 days ago, man, I don't work on Sundays, but one of our clients said, hey, we have two churches that work out of our space, and we really would love to get some video footage of that. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I went out and I captured some video content of these two different churches. And I texted my wife. I said, even though I'm working on a Sunday, which I don't normally do, I said, I have an extreme amount of joy.
Yeah.
And I knew it was because I felt his presence.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
It is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's when I think guys will ask sometimes, not to shift us into a different topic because we're getting close to the end of our hour here, but
Yeah.
they'll say, how do I know when I found my calling, or how do I know when I'm, found my purpose, or all those kinds of things. And what you're describing is some of how I would answer that to people. I'm like, when
Yep.
you're doing your work and you feel that,
Yep.
like you're in the right spot.
Oh man,
That you're in the right spot. Yeah.
it has been confirmation after confirmation since Sunday. I had a guy that I worked with last week, and he's like, Chris, you know what makes a difference with you? I was like, what? He's like, you care. And I asked him to unpack that a little bit, and I was like, I do. I actually do. And in the acknowledgement of like in accepting like, wow, I actually do care because this is something I'm highly passionate about. It's not just something I do. And so I'm excited to see where things go the rest of today,
Yeah.
tomorrow, next week with this, because it's like a newfound joy and it's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
I keep saying awesome, but man, I can't think of any other word right at the moment.
That's okay. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. So I want to give you a chance as we wrap up. The way I like to end this is
Yeah,
what's sort of a final point you love to give to men about blended families, building families, anything, because we kind of bounced around a lot of topics
we
here.
did. Yeah.
Just a final point that you'd like to leave everybody with.
Man, men, here's what I would say to you. If you're experiencing contention in your relationship, it's because you're not being intentional with being in unity with your wife and with the Lord. And I would say if you want to start to see peace unfold, get your relationship right with the Lord. Let all that stuff go that you think that you have figured out, drop it at the cross and grab onto him, and then grab onto your wife and bring her into conversation with where you're at. Because if she doesn't know where you are, she doesn't know how to pray for you. And
Yeah.
that's been one of the things that Jamie and I have been doing is I've been bringing her in. Like I've shared with her stuff, like leaning across the island in the kitchen saying, hey, today is frustrating and here's why, and giving a legit why to it. She's like, wow, I would have never guessed that. And so there's that vulnerability in the communication with your wife so that she can be praying with you and not just doing a general prayer, because our wives want to love us, they want to honor us, and they want to serve us. And when we give them context about where we are and where we're not, that shows that we're human. That shows that we have to be reliant on the Lord, but we also have to be reliant on her coming together with us. And so I would just challenge you, if you're not in unity with your wife, with the Lord, try that for a week, see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. That's my version. That's awesome. That's a great way to end. That's a great way to end. Hey, if guys want to connect with you or find out just more about you, what you do, that sort of thing, where do they find you? Where do they go?
Well, man, if you're looking for video content for your business or your ministry or nonprofit, go to wearethreadpool.com. And if you're looking for a podcast where we talk about, our tagline is conquering today together so we can build legacy for tomorrow. It's called Handle the Daily, and it's handlethedaily.com. And it's about having these kinds of questions. On Mondays, we interview men about their role as husband and dad. We don't talk business, ministry, or anything. Who are you as a husband and who are you as a dad? And then on Fridays, we lean into what you're leaning into the Lord with. And so that could be whether you're taking your family through grief, or you're talking about how do you celebrate the small wins,
Yeah.
or it's How do you create a text thread with your extended family to let them know that you're thinking about them, that you're praying for them, and creating communication even when you're not getting communication back? So our Fridays are fun, they're intense, but they're about leaning into those things that are important to the men. So if you're looking for a podcast like that, uh, check it out, or check out We Are Threadpool for video marketing for your business. You can
Excellent.
reach me at Chris@wearethreadpool.com.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll make sure to include all those links. I hope guys do reach out to you. As is great conversation. Hopefully guys followed, because yeah, we bounced around a lot of topics.
We
So
did,
hopefully
yeah.
guys followed along there. But it was a lot of fun. Great talking with you today. Have an awesome day.
You too. Thanks, Warren.